Each day that I ask you to read from the Odyssey, I'm going to kind of go through some things that you really need to know to help your understanding. Now, the Odyssey is a very confusing story, and one of the things that it makes it difficult to understand is that it is a frame story, and it's being told in flashback by Odysseus. And then halfway through in part 2, we switch to the present, what's actually happening right then. So what I've asked you to read today is part 1, The Adventures of Odysseus. It starts at page 757, and then Sailing from Troy, and then finally the Lotus Eaters. So on page 757, the speaker is calling on the Muses. And in Greek mythology, the Muses were like a group of 9 women that would inspire the speaker to tell the story and share it through the oral tradition. And what's happening is, if you turn to 759, Odysseus is telling this story at King Alcinous's table. So the Trojan War has already happened, and all of Odysseus' men are lost, and they've been shipwrecked. And Odysseus is found washed up on the beach, half dead, and King Alcinous finds him. So he is sitting at King Alcinous's table at this feast, explaining to the king and the guests what happened to him after the Trojan War and what happened to all of the men. So each part of the story, it's kind of like an episode or a section. Now, the Odyssey, the actual book, is actually nearly this thick. So what we're reading is a very condensed version. So we're looking at really brief little episodes of what happened in the story. And one of the things that you need to understand for the sake of this story is that in Greek mythology, and really in all of the ancient world, because this is true in the Bible as well, hospitality 100% determined your goodness as a character. Now, that fact is going to play a major role when we meet the Cyclops and Polyphemus, but you also see this in Disney stories as well. Like when Belle knocks on the Beast's castle, we know that the Beast is a bad guy because he doesn't want to let Belle in, but all of the little enchanted characters are like, be our guest, put our service to the test. So we know that King Alcinous is a good man because when he finds this stranger on the beach, his immediate reaction is to bring him in, get him dressed and fed, and then he's intrigued, like, who are you and what has happened? So you need to remember, from the beginning of the Odyssey all the way through the end, the good guys are always mean to strangers, the good guys are always really nice to strangers and welcome them in, and the bad guys chastise them and are very suspicious of them. So make sure that you understand that. So good guys will be great to strangers and invite them in. Bad guys will be mean to strangers and elderly people, and that was a sign of morality. Now, when we get to page 759, it's really important that you can't show you the screen in the video, but these little shaded boxes that are in your textbook, and obviously they're in the digital version of the textbook, are really, really important. Make sure that you pay close attention to those. That gives you kind of a summary of what's being left out between the sections of the original text that are not in our edited version in the textbook. So on page 759, it says, 10 years after the Trojan War, Odysseus departs from the goddess Calypso's island. He arrives at Phoenicia, ruled by Alcinous. Alcinous offers a ship to Odysseus and asks him to tell of his adventures. So King Alcinous is a really good guy because he, found Odysseus and brought him in. But he even takes that further. He's like, I'm even going to offer you my own ships and wealth in order for you to get back to Ithaca. But I just want to know, how you got here. So he's really going above and beyond, which tells us that he's a really good guy. Now, one note about Calypso. So Calypso was this, enchanted goddess, and she kind of held Odysseus captive on her island for a while, and she was a nymph, which means that she was really sexual and obsessed with affection, and she kind of looked at Odysseus as his boy toy for a while, or her boy toy. And then finally he convinces Calypso, hey, you got to let me go. I got to get back to my wife. But Odysseus, he says that he was never unfaithful to Penelope in his heart, but he certainly wasn't the best husband along this journey home. So that's kind of the main background that you need to know for today. One more point that I will make about the lotus eaters. So what happens when someone ate from the lotus eater flower is they totally lost their desire to get home. So each little episode here, we learn a few men were lost here and a few men were lost here. So a couple of the men are lost because they eat this lotus flower, and it makes them just completely lose their desire to be home. And with each story that Odysseus tells, or each part of the story that Odysseus tells Osinius, we learn what happened to the rest of the men, eventually discovering how they all died at the end in a big shipwreck. Make sure that you're texting me and asking me any questions if you do not understand.